as humans, I think we just have lost really what that deep understanding is around what it is to feel welcomed, what it is to belong. The evolved work is for us to be able to be in deep, deep listening about what's in the collective field and find ourselves within that. We need to come and embed ourselves back into the context that we are nature.
It's feeling so good to be back on air with you all this series, coming out of the winter soil and into the spring flowering. I am fresh from hosting our beautiful leadership retreat, and I am feeling fully in remembrance of how potent and stunning it is to gather in community and take time to connect to ourselves, each other, and nature. Reinvigorated by what happens when we gather intentionally in circles on the land, I am dreaming up our next offering, which I will share with you next week. My guest today is Jewels Wingfield, a catalyst, educator, and healer. She lives and works in the middle of the ancient 200,000 acre Forest of Dean in the UK. Jewels is founder and director of Living Love and the creator of EarthHeart, where she connects us with her unique methodology to catalyse humanities' evolution, reminding us of the interconnectedness of life. Jewels' work draws on a rich tapestry of wisdom, threads gathered through a long life journey of activism and learning of a variety of teachings, including earth-based spirituality, sacred ecology, shamanism from Celtic lore, ancestral gateways, the ecology of conscious relationship, and sacred sexuality. In her offerings and through her private therapy practice, she facilitates grief work, ancient womb wisdom teachings, women's blood mysteries, ecstatic dance, and somatic movement and meditation practices. Jewels has spent much of her life involved in activism in various ways. She believes that our own personal journeys are the most useful gift that we can bring to each other, in alignment with the biggest, clearest love. In this conversation, called Circles of Belonging, we explore the themes of community, reciprocity, and nature connection. As we speak to the question, how can we dismantle walls of oppression and build communities rooted in belonging? We hope that this conversation offers you a fresh perspective and common ground. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community, or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. Jewels, it is a delight to welcome you. Thank you for being here.
It is a delight to be here with you, Amisha.
What are the futures of your wildest dreams?
Wow. So when you invited me to do this and I saw that question, my heart lifted, because so much of what's happening at the moment feels so heavy and weighty and dense and wants to sort of pull us down. And this question, when I heard it, it's like my whole body just lifted. There was this sense of expansion and lift. And it's important that we ask this question, but not go into spiritual bypass, not to go into sort of, oh yeah, it's all fine, it's all fluffy, let's just focus on the light. Like to hold that question while we hold like the real truth of where we are. So my vision basically is to co-create a world, where we can remember that the evolution of our consciousness is reliant on the thriving of the natural world, and that the thriving of the natural world is completely reliant on the evolution of our consciousness. And this is the circle that I see, the circle of reciprocity. it's like we're completely intertwined. One leads into the other. It's like the infinity symbol. They're just flowing one within the other.
In amongst all of the denseness that we're experiencing, how do we hold and be guided by such a vision?
Well, there are a few themes here, but the fundamental first one is coming back to our true nature. And it's interesting, that phrase, true nature, because embedded in it is the word nature. So there's the clue. It's like we need to come and embed ourselves back into the context that we are nature, because we've separated ourselves off. We've gone into a sort of hierarchical system where we think that the earth belongs to us rather than we belong to the earth. And that for me is the first step. And all of that for me sits into the theme of belonging. It's like we've lost our sense of belonging. It's belonging to the earth, belonging to the mystery, belonging to community, belonging to a sense of being welcomed somehow. Like so many of us feel unwelcome fundamentally in our life. And it was even from the day we were born. Francis Weller talks about the village and how different our lives would be if when we were born into this village where 25 generations of our ancestors behind were born onto exactly the same piece of land. And that land has been understood and connected with and tended to. And when we're born, there's the whole village there with 40 pairs of hands and eyes going, we're so glad you're here. You belong. And that there's that sense of belonging from day one. Even if we don't, we misbehave, if you like, or even if we aren't like wonderful, perfect human beings, that there's this sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging feels like the missing piece. We live in such isolation. And because of this soul wound that we all carry, which because we weren't welcomed like that, we have this fundamental belief that there's something wrong with us, that we're not welcome, that we don't belong, that there's something wrong with us, that we're not loved, etc. That village that we were embedded into, even if we go away from the village, so we go off traveling around the world, we go off on our ventures, in our psyche, we know the village exists and we know that we can go back. And just the knowing of that changes how we move in the world. It completely changes how we move in the world because there's a place in our soul. We go, that land, I belong to that land. I belong to those people. I belong to everything that is there in the more than human world. And there's this deep time lineage is a context that's holding me. There's future ancestors there. There's elders there. There's the entire diversity of life represented there. I, in my uniqueness, have a place in that circle. And I don't have to question whether I belong there. I can come and take my place in that circle. And I'm not going to sit there going, oh, I wonder if it's okay to be here. And something about, even if I do something that goes against, how the best version of myself, I commit a crime, I do something horrible to someone, I'm violent, I do something. There's this beautiful tradition in the Dagara tradition. And when something like that happens in their village, like somebody does something, that the way they see that is the reason that person has done something like that is because they've lost their sense of belonging, that they've forgotten that they're connected. So their response to that isn't to punish them. They bring them into the middle of the village and then love them to within an inch of their life and remind them of all of their brilliance, of all of their magnificence, of all of the qualities that they are. And that brings them back into their connectedness. And then from there, it's like you're less like, you're just going to feel your own heart and be like, oh my God, I didn't want to do that. I mean, how different our world would be if that's how we arrived, if that was the context of our life. That sense of belonging is like the pivotal piece that changes everything.
It's beautiful. And as you speak about it, I'm sure everyone listening can feel like how special that might be, but it's very different from the world that we live in.
It is.
We live in a world that has deep histories of colonization, that has deep histories of war, and deep presences of these things as well. And we have, so many countries that are being obliterated in one way or another, and people that are searching for a place to call home. And even within cultures where people might be born in the country that their ancestors are from, perhaps they don't live in the same areas. We do this thing where we move to cities, or we move to areas where we feel like there might be like-minded community, whatever that means. Do you really feel that that level of belonging and welcome can be taught or can be healed through workshops and processes?
Oh, I so love what you're saying, because what I've just spoken to, it's like such a deep longing. But then there's the reality, like you say, with everything that you've just, brought to the frame. It's like, okay, what does this actually look like on planet Earth today, given everything, given all of that? Yeah, you're right. It's not accessible to everybody. But there's something about, often we don't let ourselves vision and dream for what we really want because we can't see how to make it happen. We go, well, what's the point in longing for that? What's the point in dreaming for that? What's the point in even talking about it? Because it's just never going to happen. And for me, there's something about honoring the longing and honoring the dream and speaking of it and holding it in my system, because I'm now in a conversation with something that's bigger than me, that's something that is of the source truth. And even if it never happens, it's not the point. It's not throwing away that deep, deep longing that kind of calls us back in. And so we might not be able to create what I just described, because, let's face it, that's going to take generations upon generations. Maybe it'll never happen. But we can touch.
Well, also that involves then some sort of solo race type thing. It doesn't allow for all the diversity, and it doesn't honor all the people that have either been forced to leave their homes or have chosen to move somewhere else. And so it's completely impossible without erasing races, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that's the big, big piece. And then how do we, then bring that down into the reality that we're in right now? How do we do that? So there's something about holding that as a kind of, I feel this longing. I want everyone to have a sense of belonging. I want everyone to feel that they belong, that they're welcome, that all of diversity is here in an equal shape, whatever that is. And there's different pieces to this. One of the threads that I work with is leadership, because I'm kind of with this piece of, well, what's the most effective way that I can use who I am as a person and everything, how I've arrived in this world. I left home with 100 quid in my pocket, but nevertheless, I have a lot of privilege simply by where I was born and how I was born and the families that I was born into. And how can I best use that in order to effect change, rather than sort of climbing into a corner and going, oh, fucking hell, I'm part of the problem. Also I am part of the problem, but how can I change that around so that actually me being part of the problem is a way that I can now be serving to change something, because I have privileges that others don't, which mean I can do that. So that's kind of the passion that I've got. When I was 16, I was at something called the Battle of the Beanfields. I don't know how old you are, you may not remember that, but it was back in the Thatcher era. And I was a traveller, and it was all kicking off, and, the police were like beating us all up and trying to drag us off. And I remember thinking then, just want to go back to the land. I just want to go back to the land. The land is where it's at. It's like, how many of us, like you said, how many of us have the luxury to choose the piece of land that we live on because our body and our soul and our lineage and our culture, or, all of that calls us. And then we don't have to worry about how we're going to make a living, or whether that's convenient for the rest of the family, or whether it's a war-torn country, or whether I'm going to be welcome because I'm the only person of colour there, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's so painful.
Whether I can afford that bit of land.
Whether I can afford it, all of it. It's huge. We're at this monumental threshold where it's almost like everything is just being burned down to the ground. We're just being shown like this massive light bulb on all the fucking distortion, on all the ways in which whatever we've built this great, wonderful empire of human species. We're seeing now how disconnected we've been, and the result of it.
What do you see in the result of it? We were talking a little bit about things that are maybe more prevalent. What is it that you see that disconnect? How is it playing out?
It's really what I said at the beginning, this feeling of feeling welcomed, that I am welcome, that there's a place for me. Whatever my culture, whatever my financial background, whatever I've come from, whatever I'm experiencing, all of it. There's this thread that I hear people sharing about in circle again and again and again, is I don't feel welcome and I don't know where my place is, and I'm not able to live the life that I want to live and bring the gifts that I want to give because I'm too busy struggling to survive, or dealing with living in a city that doesn't welcome me, and in a culture, all of that. Like, I'm just struggling to get by with food, shelter, water.
And mental health,
physical sickness, oppression, discrimination. Like, the list is endless. And it seems that when we boil it down, and, we're sitting in circle and there's space to slow down enough, and really that someone feels safe enough to do that, and to open up that really, really, really tender place, like what I call the underbelly. And so often we find this place of just feel like I don't belong, I'm not welcome, and that I can't be who I actually am. It's like, I don't think our deepest pain is about not being loved. I think our deepest pain is not being able to live the life we know we're meant to live and give of our magnificence. That, I think, is our deepest pain. And you've got that on an individual level, and then you've got it as a systemic level where all the prejudices come in and all the systems of hierarchy and dominance. So it's, you've got personal and collective to navigate in that. It's like being up against the wall and you can't. It's like being in a small room with 4 brick walls, and it's like, which way do I turn? There's no way I can turn that makes this feel a bit easier.
I'm just taking a few breaths with that. And so, how do we break those walls? Just a little bit, enough to get some air.
I know. Well, the work that I offer is embedded in nature. That feels really important. And I just want to speak to that because I live in the middle of a forest, like, well, hey, really great for me, really easy, da, da, da. But there was a period of time, I had a reminder, there was a period of time a few years ago where I was living in this flat, and it was about, it was quite a few stories up, and, it wasn't a nature-bound flat, it was a flat in the city, and I was waiting to move to this place. And I was there for a whole winter. I knew, I sat there just feeling really, what's the point? What's the point in any of it? Why am I doing what I'm doing? This is all just pointless. It's just shit. I just lost the juice, to sort of do what I'm doing. And I would look out the window and I thought, I know that I am 2 minutes away from sitting under a tree. And I know that if I go and sit under that tree, I'll feel better. I know that. Could I get off the sofa? No, I couldn't. I was literally frozen on that sofa, even though I knew that I would feel better. Now, there's plenty of people who don't even know they'd feel better with that. So that's the juxtapose that we're in.
And you're saying this as an example, like a few years ago. So when you're already very much on this path and doing this work.
Exactly. So I see what we have ahead of us.
It speaks really to the power of that collective energy and how it can really strip away the inspiration, the vision, the ability to do the things that are beneficial for us and beneficial for our contribution on a wider level. It's really important to highlight that, because there's so much, especially I think when people know like what it is that they need, it can create a lot of shame to not be able to access it, not to be able to get off the sofa and walk 2 minutes to that tree.
Well, and also just not have the luxury of time to do that. I get up at 5 a.m, I'm straight to work, deal with the kids, come home, go to my third job, all of that. It's like, well, yeah, that's all well and lovely, go and sit under a tree. Well, yeah, I'd love So for me, it's about the micro. It's almost like working with it in the homeopathic principle. I get up, I got to go out, I get on the bus, I go to work. And where do I put my focus? So I can put my focus on it's all shit, and I'm just right up against everything. Even as I sit on this bus, I'm up against all the stuff. And I can turn my focus for a moment to the clouds, or to a little bird that's landed on the wall, or to a leaf on the tree. Like there's always something, however small it is, that we can, it's like having a little chocolate biscuit for the soul. It's just a little moment where I can remember something. And I do believe we all can take those moments, whatever is happening in our day, to do those small, tiny, tiny acts, and to notice what happens in my body when I do that. What happens in my psyche? Does it impact the next 5 minutes? Does it impact how I feel about my day? Does it impact in a positive way whatever it is I'm trying to navigate in the next 2 hours, 3 hours, day, night? So rather than those big, massive, right, yeah, it's all very well. I'd love to live in the village. I'd love to live in a leafy glade. I'd love to be doing the work that I was born to do. I'd love to, not feel in a minority and be oppressed. And I'd love, these small things. It's like, where's the common ground where we can all say we're all humans and find something that meets the soul in that essential way? And I do believe that when we do that, there's an energetic thread that plugs us back into each other, a bit like the root systems of the trees in the forest. It's like when there's one vulnerable tree, the other trees feed that tree, and prioritize that tree. Like, wouldn't that be amazing if we could take that principle on?
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I'm really interested in how we bridge these beautiful, beautiful visions with this dense reality. Like, I feel like more than ever, that feels really strong for me. So that's why I'm asking some of these questions in this way, because I know that I can feel that you understand this level of complexity within it. This thing that you're sharing about, how the trees and through the mycelium and everything, they look after the weaker ones within that community. Something that I've come across time and time again in spiritual communities, especially, is that that's often not what happens. And that often when somebody's really struggling with something that has happened to them, or even something that where they've ended up playing an archetype within that community, what normally happens is exile. What normally happens is, or what happens now is a very complicated psychological analysis of that person and why they have created it, and they're, and they have this disorder and that disorder, and they're this and they're that, and they're being a victim, whatever it is, or they're a narcissist, or that. It's just, I find it really interesting. So I've been part of a lot of communities and I've seen this happen time and time again. And I've seen it happen in community houses and land-based communities, and even in some of the areas where people are moving to because they want a certain kind of, they want this thing, they want this belonging, they want shared values and shared ways of being. I don't know what it is, because there's something in the human nature that we're living. And I know that's different to the true nature that you're talking about, because I imagine that you have seen a lot as well. And I'm curious as to why this happens and how we evolve our notion of community to be more like trees.
I'm literally trying not to jump up and down and do a dance in the living room. I'm glad we got here. Because yes, to everything you said, and having spent my whole life in community or seeking community or supporting communities to deal with the rupture that's happening in communities, because you're right. How many people are, oh, we want to live in a community, we want to be on a piece of land, or just want to be doing yoga every day with all my friends, and it'll all be beautiful. And like you say, it isn't beautiful. I hear endless people saying, I want to live in community. And yes, the question is, well, why isn't it happening? Why isn't there just billions of communities all over the country, whether in cities or in the countryside, or whatever kind they are? And I believe there's one thread that is the reason why. And It isn't because we don't know how to dig holes. It isn't because we're not willing to put our hands in the earth and grow food, or it isn't because of financial resources to some degree. Like people often say, oh, I haven't got the money to buy into a community. I mean, there's another layer of financial resource, but at that level, the reality is that this human wound we've got, what I call the soul wound, or we might say the core wound, because we weren't welcome, because of the not belonging, because of the exile, because of the discrimination, because of all of that, as soon as we come close to a circle of people, I mean, we only have to look at personal relationship to see that, with one person, the closer you get to another human being, the closer you get to your wound. It's a simple, simple equation. And navigating your wound with one person in a primary relationship is difficult enough, let's face it. Most of us can't even do that. Now put yourself in amongst, 5 people, 10 people, 15 people in a room, and everybody's got their version of their soul wound. And if we haven't deeply, deeply done that work and deeply committed to continue doing that work, but not in some navel gazing, oh, let's all psychoanalyze ourselves till the cows come home. Unless we do that work, community can't happen. It just can't. It will fracture. And I want to come to the piece specifically that you're talking about in terms of how we've been pathologized as humans and how we now pathologize ourselves. And so much, I mean, this is kind of edgy to say, and this is my current inquiry. Like, say, for example, the neurodiversity piece, we've got this whole thing now about, I'm massively what would be called neurodiverse. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Who got to determine what is normal that I am now measured of? Who got to say what's at the top, what we should all be? It's the same with the racism issue, the whiter the skin, all of that. It's like, who got to decide what is neuronormal? Is it just because it's the majority? Why does that make that right?
Well, we don't know if it was ever the majority. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Because actually, now that people are understanding more about autism and ADHD and highly sensitive, I mean, most people that I know are like, oh, but I'm all those things, that you read the deeper kind of symptoms and then understand about masking. And a lot of the women, especially that I know that are within the more spiritual communities, are like, oh, but yeah, like tick, 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 tick. And it's like, well, maybe the human normal, if you like, is actually more neurodiverse, but what was kind of created as that normal thread never actually was.
Exactly my point. So the narrative is, we'll go with the majority, but that's been created fictitiously by a small group of people somewhere in some blooming university or wherever, going, oh, we've decided this is normal because actually this is, white middle-aged men from America or England or somewhere like that. There, in a way, was just another bomb into the monocropping of humanity and the monocropping of the natural world, where we don't want diversity because we can't control the people if we have diversity. We need, and we can't control the people if they're free thinkers, if they're creatives, if they're connected to their feelings, if they're embodied, if they're kinesthetic, if they're intuitive, all of these qualities. And yeah, so I don't want to use this term neurodiverse because the phrase has this implicit assumption in it that there's some majority normal that we should all be, and then we're a problem if we're not that. Now I see it that the culture is the problem, the society is the problem, the collective teachings, if you want, about how we should and shouldn't be, as we arrived into our culture, into our world, into our city, into our town. This is who you should and shouldn't be. This is how you should and shouldn't behave in order to belong and in order to be welcomed. And because feeling like we belong is such a deep need, we'll throw all kinds of parts of ourselves under the bus in order to meet that one thing. So I'll now deny all these parts of myself. And yes, I'll pathologize myself even and go, yes, I've got a problem. I'm sorry. Can you make allowances for me? And I feel the shift is actually the cultural shift where we start to really challenge and question all of these principles that have been given to us about what we should and shouldn't be, and my unique neurobrilliance is my unique neurobrilliance, and no one else has that. And there was something powerful for me about getting tested and diagnosed. I didn't want to have, I don't want those labels. I don't want to be tested. I don't want to be like then boxed in as some pathology and like, ugh. But there was something key about it for me, because it gave me a sense of compassionate acceptance, first of all. Like, this isn't just me struggling. This is how I'm wired. So it brought compassion towards myself. And once I got that piece, I was like, hang on a minute. Yeah, but I'm not the problem. And then I was able to really claim these ways that I am and actually see the brilliance of them and how they've really made it possible for me to do the work I do in the world, number one. And number two, bring the creativity and the gifts and the connection that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And a kind of understanding that when you were trying to do it the way that you quote unquote should be, that it wasn't working and it will never work. And as many people can tell you, you need to do this, you need to do it like that, but that will never work for you. And I think what comes to me when you're speaking about this is, you know, the education system that we have globally, because it's a colonial system, it's like a monocrop. And what we are is like a diverse ecosystem with so many different species and so many different ways of being. And in that village that you're talking about, we would each have a unique gift that we would be bringing to that space. And so we wouldn't want to all be the same, because what I would be able to give to the village would be so different to what you're giving. And we'd be born into these kind of roles. And actually, our ancestors, our elders would be looking at us to be like, okay, like, who is this? And what they're bringing something else that we need. I don't know if you've seen Encanto, the Disney film, but it's a beautiful way of showing this story of how everyone will bring a different gift to a family, to a village, and they're completely different. And so, you know, one of the girls can like lift really heavy things, and another one can put flowers everywhere and make everything beautiful. And so everyone is allowed to be in their difference. And that's what makes everything work.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, there's that the shift is, rather than here's a set of options of who you can be as a human and try and fit yourself into one of them, or let's have a look and find out who you are as a human, see and notice what it is that makes you come alive, and then tend and nurture that and champion you to bring that as much as we possibly can. You know, now that way of growing a human, of tending and looking after a human, doesn't work on, you know, it's like it's way more effort. It's way more effort in a school. It's like now you're going to have loads more teachers, loads more classrooms, loads more subjects, loads more, you know, and it's like, well, that's a bit of a pain in the arse. And economically, that's not doable. So let's just get everyone in, give them 6 options, and they can choose one of those options. And then we'll praise them and reward them for how well they do in one of those options. And if they don't fit into those options, then we need to put them in a special place and try and make them fit into one of those options.
Yeah, absolutely.
This that we're speaking about, it feels like it's the same principle in the systems of oppression. It's the same thing in essence that's happening. You know, we're just only allowed to value a very narrow bandwidth. And because we're so desperate to belong and to be exiled, it's just the worst thing for us. We'll deny all these parts of ourselves just to meet this one thing, to belong, because exile is just, it's worse than death. You know, we've even exiled parts of our psyche. We've exiled all these wounds that we carry, the shame. We've tried to exile that out and sort of disconnect from it and go, oh, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. I'm okay. And it's like, no, we've got to bring, it's like, how can we truly understand what it is to be with diversity, whether it's in humanity or in the more than human world? We don't even know how to be with all the different parts of ourselves internally.
What pieces do you feel have been like exiled collectively from the human experience?
Oh my God, how long have we got? I mean, literally, we could just sit here and make lists, couldn't we? That would take like an hour.
I'm asking so that we can call some of those parts back in here.
So, okay, well, let's start with shame. Let's start with shame. Let's start with what we've just been speaking about, which is that we've been told literally from the moment we open our eyes, from that first breath, when we arrived in the world, however we arrived, we subtly, covertly, overtly started to get the message. You're not welcome as you are. You're not welcome as you are. You're not welcome if you're crying. You're not welcome if you're miserable. You're not welcome if you're being too loud, or you're being too quiet, or you're being a bit this, you're being a bit that. You know, all of the subtle ways that we start to go, okay, oh, I've got to be like this in order to stay inside the circle of belonging, inside the nest of love. I can't be exiled outside this original family, this original circle, because I literally won't survive. We literally won't survive because we're small beings, we're babies. You leave a baby out for 24 hours, it's going to die. So that fear is very real. And even though, you know, rationally you might say, well, I'm a grown up now, and of course that's not going to happen, it's like it lives in the part of the brain that doesn't understand linear time. You know, it lives in the amygdala, and that still believes that reality is the same now as it was then. And then add in cultural oppression, diversity, exile, you know, all of that. It's almost like that just affirms the belief that we already carry. It's like I've already got a belief from that primary imprint when I came into the world that I'm not welcome as I am. And from that place, I'll look for evidence to prove that it's true. And let's face it, there's plenty of evidence out there. Some of it is projection. Some of it isn't true, that we are welcome and it's just our wound playing out. But actually, it's quite a lot of it that is true. You know, as humans, I think we just have lost really what that deep understanding is around what it is to feel welcomed, what it is to belong. I mean, I'm in that quarry. I'll be in that quarry till the day I die. But I know there's something in this. There's something in it.
There's such an emphasis on this kind of like being your best self and optimizing everything. And then that doesn't leave space for people that are going through genuine difficulties, because if everything's just their fault and they should just be able to like snap out of it. You know, I've had this experience within communities. I've seen it where somebody can get exiled because they're going through a hard time because it's bringing the vibe down. There is this sort of balance because, of course, like we do want to connect in deeper to our health and to our vision and our possibility. And that is part of what that notion of like, you know, quote unquote best self is. It's being more connected. But there's something that gets lost around what that means in a collective system that is not a place where everyone's doing that, where everyone's able to do that all the time.
Yeah. And what I mean by of really being all of who we are isn't just the, oh, yeah, here's my brilliance and here's my shining self. But today I'm in a river of grief. And I don't even know whether that's my personal grief about something or whether I'm actually tapping into something bigger than me. But it doesn't matter. Let's be with the grief. And in that moment, if some members of the community can be the banks of the river while I am in the river, then let's be there. So it's like, let's respond to what's emerging in the space rather than define what should and shouldn't be in the space.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I want to speak to the piece you're saying around
bringing the vibe down. And
yeah, bringing the vibe down. So people are like, oh, you know, you're bringing the vibe down. And there's a piece around that. It's not the whole thing, but there's an aspect of that those of us who are kind of, well, we call them empaths or people that read energy, like the energetics ones. I think we're all like that. But, you know, some of us are more connected to that and find other people's energies. We get really, really impacted by other people's energies. And then how do we navigate that? Because we get impacted with other people's energies, either I have to go and isolate because I can't handle other people's energy. Now I'm the one that's exiled, or we demonize the person who's creating the energy that I can't handle. And there's something between those two responses that feels like where the aliveness is, which is what I was speaking to a minute ago, is how do we respond to what's in the space, taking care of ourselves so that we don't get, you know, overwhelmed and sort of battered, if you like, by the energy, but also not go and run to the cave. Because if we run to the cave, nothing really can transform because we've gone into isolation. So it's like, how can we stay relational and be with what wants to emerge?
Can you share more about that? Because I feel like that example that you've just shared will be very resonant for lots of people that are listening.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of actually many years ago, I was running this workshop. I mean, I look back over my sort of workshop career and sometimes I just cringe. And I'm like, oh my God. And I had this whole idea. It was a training. And I was like, right, tomorrow we're going to be looking at anger. This is what we need to, it's all part of the program. And this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at fire and where we've gotten repressed and all of that. And I was super fired up about it. And I came in the room, and I sit down and start talking to the people and, this is what we're doing. And I was reading the room and reading their faces and just seeing there was just this grief in at least half of the room's faces. But because at that point, I wasn't, as confident or as comfortable or trusting as I am now. And I was like, no, this is terrible. We're doing anger stuff today. We're going to be going out in the woods and screaming at the trees and all of this. And I could feel myself pulling in all these different, like a magician was coming in and I was thinking, how can I get these people to get on board with my program for today? And the more I tried to do that, the worse it got. And I could see people's bodies were starting to kind of slump and people were going out to the loo and getting drinks of water and rustling around. And it was such a teaching because for ages, I just couldn't let go of my, no, this is what we're doing because yesterday something happened and I saw that this now needs to happen. We need to look at fire. So I went, okay, let's take a break. Let's take a loo break. So we took a loo break and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go outside, put my feet on the ground, come back to my body. And then it was like, boom, okay, I got it. It's like, I need to respond to what's in the room. This was a complete game changer for me in my facilitation because up until then, I mean, I always do respond to what's in the room, but I don't always trust myself to go with it. And there was just this moment. So I came back in the room and I said, okay, everyone, scrap that. We're not doing that today. Let's be with what's emergent in the space. And I just allowed a space for people to share where they were at. And from that, a natural process evolved, a beautiful ritual evolved, actually, a grief ritual, which suddenly, as soon as we were there, the energy in the room just completely changed. And the women who were going, oh, this is all too much for me, I can't handle it, were in the river going, yeah, it's like, this is where I needed to be because they could be what was actually true. And there were some people who were like, hey, I wanted to do the anger piece. And it's okay, you be the banks of the river. It's like, the way that the principle of the dolphins, they always swim in such a way that the dolphin that is most weak or vulnerable, they put at the front so that they're always making sure. And that dolphin gets energy from the fact that all the other dolphins are kind of around that dolphin. And there's something about that. Like when we think individually, like, oh, but that doesn't meet my need. I want to swim fast. People will often say in workshops, oh, well, I don't want to go that slow. I feel like I've already done that. I want to do this more evolved work. And it's like the evolved work is for us to be able to be in deep, deep listening about what's in the collective field and find ourselves within that, but not just be on this personal flight of, well, I need this, but also not fall into, oh, I've got to make sure everybody else's needs are met before I can meet my own. Again, it's what's this middle place between sacrificing ourselves or self-absorption and sort of solo plight to enlightenment. We sort of tend to sort of swing back and forth, one to the other from those places. And what I'm interested in is what's that middle ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see that also in the community piece as well, that they'll live in a community house and then they'll go to the cottage in the woods by themselves. And then do that and then, okay, go back to a community house and back to a cottage. And it's like, okay, how do you find that space of being able to be with what is? And I feel that the empath archetype and the people pleasing tendency, but then also that piece about demonizing as well, like when the boundaries aren't clear.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about an experience I had recently. I was in a circle and one person was clearly struggling, like really struggling, like they just sort of flipped out. It wasn't my circle, but it was a circle I was in. And how quickly the circle wanted to pathologize that person and go, we need to take that person out and we need to help them because they can't be in the circle. And actually, when it was unpacked, it was recognized that what many of us were uncomfortable about being in that circle, is the mirror of that part of us that was being shown. And we were so relieved not to be that person. Yes, oh, thank God I'm not being that person who's been scapegoated and pathologized as a problem. So I'm very happy to put my focus on that person and help them and be kind and loving to them, because it means I don't have to look at anything in myself.
Like that person needs all the support, but also when a group also will be like, that person's the problem, it's the same thing. It's not, it's seeing it's a mirror. That person is like reflecting something back into that community, and the community which is individuals, but as a whole, like chooses to kind of go with one of those responses often, instead of actually just allowing that person to be that mirror and being able to sit with what that reflection is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that particular one is quite close to my heart, because as a child, I was demonized. I was the problem in the family. I was the difficult one, and then they didn't have to look at anything. They could just put it all on me, then apparently live their happy lives. So yeah, that one's close to my heart.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. And you receive a number of benefits, such as monthly soul space, going deeper sessions, access to our library of workshops, and discounts on all our online and in-person experiences. Our membership is what makes us able to make this show and stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today. So I feel like there's still like this piece, like how does an empath resource themselves to stay in community, to stay in the circle?
Yeah. So the key that I've seen is being able to get in touch with what I actually need. So empaths have been sort of trained, or their survival to belong is to deny their needs, is to be, I've got to make sure everybody else in the space is okay in order for me to be okay. Because an empath feels so much energy. It's like, I can't have any conflict in the space. I can't have any shadow distortion, because it'll all feel overwhelming. So in order to do that, I have to be hypervigilant. This is in the original family. I have to be hypervigilant to everybody in the family, be the peacemaker, make sure everybody's happy, everybody's got what they want. Then I won't be exiled. These are my conditions of love and of belonging. These is what I have to do. I have to completely deny myself. So then, of course, you go into a space and, whoa, all this energy is kicking off. It wouldn't even occur to an empath to go, well, what do I actually need? Beyond, I've just got to get away. That's the only need that they can connect with to create safety. But of course, they go away and then they're on their own. It's like, oh, thank God for that. I feel bliss now. I feel all relaxed. I can be myself. But they're not relational anymore. And we long to be relational. So the way I work with empaths in that way is to help them to connect with what they actually need that would make it possible for them to stay relational in that moment. What would make it possible for you to stay in the room without feeling overwhelmed? And that takes really, really deep listening. It's almost like the space just needs to expand out and open, and there needs to be a level of stillness, not deadness in the space, but a level of stillness and a level of deep listening, so that the empath system can slow down enough and come out the freeze and all of those responses and find their body, find their sense of self, notice all the stuff that's happening, all the energies that are moving in the body, all the mind works that are going on. What is it that I actually need that will make it possible for me to stay in this space? That's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take some doing. When you've had 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of just denying needs.
That's really interesting. And that there's a question that comes to mind. I'm curious what you feel in terms of, are people born empaths or born sensitive, psychic, with that kind of deeper connection, able to talk to plant spirits, that kind of thing? Or does that happen as a result of the family system and being in that role that you just described? Or is it both? Is it that if you come into a family like with that, then you're likely to then have that trauma if you're born into a family where everyone else isn't like that or isn't living like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I have to bring in deep time here. I have to bring in the ancestral wounding, because, the wounds that we experience in this life, there's the ones that we get from this life, from this first breath, from this parenting that we got. But also, I think we carry so much from the ancestral patterning. I mean, I know that for myself. When I hit menopause, I was like, whoa, oh, here's the ancestral patterning moving through my system. Now I'm like, hang on a minute, that's not fair. I got to clear all your lot as well. It's that.
And people feel it in pregnancy as well. It's like,
Exactly. So I think it's both and. I do feel that we are really unique and different, and each of us comes in already with a unique shape, if you like, soul shape, spirit shape, body shape, all, endocrine system shape. And that's shaped from ancestral patterning, but also just, who knows, the mystery download into our bodies. And then those shapes get illuminated or harmed as we experience whatever we experience in this life as we come in. So we might be born more empathic maybe than someone else, we could say. That empath quality will then be used as a skill to survive trauma, be used as a tool, as a way to survive trauma, or make the trauma worse because I'm an empath and because I don't know how to put a shield up, because I haven't yet figured out how to sort of make choice and put a protective shield around myself, or let these energies move through my body so I don't have to absorb them all. I think putting a shield up is the first step for an empath, but I actually don't think that's the end game, because if you put a shield up, again, you're in isolation. Ultimately, the transformation of where empath doesn't, when an empath is struggling, is to learn how to let energies move through the body rather than be stored in the body. It's like a sponge. We just soak it up and soak it up and soak it up and hold it, rather than, if I just let it flow through me and straight into the earth, then I don't have to carry any of that. It doesn't have to become part of my cellular memory.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a beautiful practice that I do regularly, which it's actually creating the boundary, but from inside out. And it's not really a boundary, it's more of an empowerment. And so it allows me to still be in relationship. I'm not having to like protect myself from everything. I'm just allowing myself to be stronger and take up more space. And it's in relationship with the earth and, with the great above. And so it kind of allows that strength and then for things to move through me. And I feel that that's a really powerful skill, because otherwise it can get a bit around like, I need protecting from everyone, from everything.
That's the shadow. That's the shadow I've got to protect from. I really am. So, yeah, absolutely. And taking up more space will be very, very terrifying to an empath, because basically that sounds like saying, well, I'm just going to absorb even more shit.
Yeah,
But like you say, taking up space is different to pushing stuff away.
absolutely. And there's also the collective field, which has so much trauma, witch hunts, from the colonial kind of cuttings off from cultures that are connected to nature and more embodied in that way. And so that also comes into play when those things are quite a natural reflex for somebody, that there is that very genuine fear that I've felt myself, like in my journey, and I've witnessed in so many people that I've worked with, of that, but what will happen to me if I allow this part of myself to take up space in the world?
I'll get killed, raped, tortured, exiled, marginalized.
And sometimes it all happens as well.
Absolutely. It's not like it's a fantasy fear. It's
No.
real. It's that fear's based on historical experience. I just want to come back and just say one more thing about the empath thing. And you were saying, do we come in, like that? fundamentally, I like to believe, and I have a sense of, jury's always out, that I think we're all fundamentally that connected. And it's just that we've become disconnected. I don't think we've got to try and learn to talk to trees or try and learn to read the space. It's just the human sort of protector style from the trauma that has meant that some of those qualities that we essentially are have had to be pushed out and pushed to the side because we're busy trying to protect ourselves from feeling the shame of the trauma and the exile and all that horrific stuff that, yeah, there's a cost, if you like. So that's why I come back to the soul wound work, that when we do that, so much else just sort of can start to change and shift around it.
Beautiful. I would love to hear more about how you, and there's a lot that you can share here, so feel free to choose a story, but you mentioned that you left home, you had £100 in your pocket, and here you are in this beautiful elfin fairyland that you live in. And I would love to know how some of that has unfolded for you and how you've learned this soul work.
Well, I think I came in with this work. I mean, I've always been fascinated by human relating. And, as a little kid at 5, talking to the plants and just thinking, well, everyone does that. I mean, of course, the plants talk to you. I mean, and then finding out, oh, actually, it doesn't seem like everybody does talk to the plants, right? I'll keep that quiet. But yeah, and I think then the big pivotal moment for me was I left home, whatever home was carrying this feeling of exile, that I didn't belong, that I'm not welcome, that there's a problem with me. I am the problem. They'll be better off without me. I am the difficulty. I had a really strong rebel in me, a really strong fighter from an extremely traumatic childhood. And I kind of put on all this armor in order to survive and say, you're not having my soul, you're not going to take my spirit. And so I became a very kind of rebellious, angry teenager and joined the traveller movement and, started activism to protect the planet and protect the world. And all of that felt really, really important to me. And I didn't want to live in a house. It's like I just wanted to be on the land. I wanted to be on the land. I wanted to feel this sense of belonging and find my people, find my tribe, people who think like me, people kin, all of that. This moment, this day when this was all kicking off with the police. And I just sort of almost like I was on my knees and I was just looking. I was like, okay, I just want a piece of land. I just want a piece of land where we can come and connect. That's it. And I kind of held that vision ever since. And I carried on really living an incredibly simple life with very little overheads, and somehow was just very, very successful in what I was doing. But because I didn't have any overheads, all of that money that I was earning was just sort of being put away. And I wasn't even sort of, I don't know, I wasn't even counting it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, I've got my little veg patch, I've got my I've got my, it's all really simple. And then 25 years later, I'm like, oh, wow, I've got £500,000. How did that happen? But, that's 25 years of not having any, having very, very little, because I didn't feel that living a simple life on the land was hardship. I was just in my element. That's what I love. That's what resourced me. That's what helped me to feel like I don't have to be my trauma. I don't have to be this fucked up, exiled human. I belong here. I'm connected here. I feel safe. I feel alive. I feel like I can, and there's these people. I've always sort of been on the margins, like with the weirdos and the freaks, as commonly known when I was growing up. Because of my experience of exile, like, there's that resonance. And so I think I've always been like a fighter for the underdog, that kind of thing. And that's definitely embedded in my work. Even with all the privilege that I have, there's this strand as I can feel that. And that's really been my passion. That's really been my passion. I mean, there was some naivety in there because I was like, I just want a piece of land where there's no overheads and we can just come and be, and it can all be on reciprocity. It can all be on exchange, and we can, go down the builder's merchant and try and exchange some bricks for dragonfly wings, and they're not grooving on it. But so, there's a grounded reality to the vision I'm doing here. That's this huge ship that I'm now kind of at the helm of. But yeah, that's how I arrived here.
And I love that it's come from your own relationship with living on the land, that you've been so deep in that. And then that's what you're able to share with people that come and visit and take part in your programs and spend time there.
Something about, when I, lived on different bits of land in my life, but never for long enough. And when I got here, I remember walking here, there's 2 big oak trees, and I sat between these 2 oak trees and I thought, this might well be the longest relationship I'm going to have in this lifetime. And I want to know what happens when I really commit to a relationship with one piece of land. And I sit through the seasons and through the turning and through the cycles of death and rebirth happening and feel my body in that, and that intimate relationship with the land. And so much of our uprootedness, I think, is because it's circling right back to what we were saying at the beginning. And I know it's, fantasy at the moment for so many of us, but there is something about being connected to a piece of land that we haven't chosen because of life's circumstance. That there's somewhere the alchemy of us can just land back in what's true. And the year course that we do, the belonging, is all about that. It's not only the circle of humans and how do we truly dismantle all the stuff that's going on and come into a really genuine sense of belonging, can welcome and include more. What's it also like to commit to a relationship with a piece of land, because the land where we do the work is here, for a whole 4 seasons, and just to notice how the rhythms in us are the same as the rhythms, and where we can be in that reciprocity, rather than be in this, like, what can the land give me? What can nature give me in order for my evolution? But actually, what am I giving back here? What's the circle of reciprocity? Because I don't think it works to just be like, I want personal enlightenment. It's separation. It's just more separation, which is sort of such a shadow of the spiritual community and the sort of personal development world, is the me, my, I, The
more you go down the me, my, I route, the more you're going to push away anyone that is experiencing any of the collective pain. It's that thing that I was talking about earlier, where, like, if you're just trying to be your best self and that anyone that isn't being their best self is bringing you down, then there's a complete disconnect. And then that life is full of grief. Life is full of anger, especially in this world that we're living in, where there's so much distortion and so much inequality. Those are such important parts of the human experience. I feel that if we push so strongly for that individual enlightenment or ascent, that, we're kind of trying to live above reality, not in reality.
Completely. And I have such a thing about, this is going to trigger maybe some people who are listening in my career right here.
I don't want to do that for you, Jules, but go on.
There's the shadow side of the love and light positivity thing. Let's just focus on the positivity. Let's just focus on the love and light, because where we put our focus and our intention is what we manifest. And I get it. That is all true. But it's both and. It can't be at the cost of denying what is actually happening on the ground. So, my thing is, yes, back to what I said at the beginning, let's hold the vision of this more beautiful world that Charles Eisenstein's talked about. So many people, let's hold that in our hearts, in our soul. It's like we all long and ache for this in our whatever version it is for ourselves. And let's keep our feet deep in the earth. It's easy to meditate on top of a mountain. Anyone can do that. Can we meditate in the middle of a war? Or not meditate, but, sort of, can we get inside the middle of the suffering and still connect with that and let that be the driver that moves any action that we do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that something that can happen in spiritual spaces, that the spiritual language can end up causing so much harm. I was at somebody whose creative spiritual work I just adore, said something about refugees, and I just, like, everything in my body, it was like I didn't, I looked around the circle and no one else was triggered. And they had said something about how, like, they truly believe that that anyone who's like a refugee has like chosen to experience the dissolution of their country and these challenges, like their soul wants these challenges. And I was like, really? Like all brown people have just chosen to experience hardship on the planet, which then takes you into a whole place of like whites being a superior race. This person wouldn't have even known that that's where that thinking goes. Most people don't know that that's in Steiner, and that there's a whole part of Steiner that talks about the white person being superior. And I just, and I looked around, and of course I was in a room full of white people, and I looked around and no one, everyone was just like enjoying the song and whatever. And I was just, and like everything in my body was just like, oh, this is so dangerous. This thing that is there around that choosing one's reality versus experiencing one's reality, it means that then you can say, well, I don't need to do anything about all of those people that are now experiencing drought or hurricanes, or their countries are war torn, because they've chosen to experience that, and that's part of their soul's evolution. Whereas I've chosen to experience this lovely dinner and a lovely, like, easy middle class life. And I just find that this disconnect, it means that so many beautiful people with gorgeous hearts and so much compassion and privilege and resources to do something don't, because they kid themselves that somehow everything's perfect in that order. Not order, but as in like it's all natural order of what souls have chosen. It means that sometimes this emphasis in the spiritual world of working on oneself and sort of allowing everything else just to be as it is, because that's kind of how it is, and that there's some disconnect around the activism part here. I would love to hear what moves for you whilst I share all of that.
I'm really, really touched that you're sharing that and that you share it here, because I can only imagine how painful that was. And I've been in circles with similar kinds of things that you're speaking of. And I have such a thing about, oh, it's all perfect. And, I asked and I invited this, like you say, for all the reasons that you say, it's just not helpful. It's so unhelpful. And it's the shadow of the whole spiritual thing, where we can't actually just be with what's really real and what's really actually happening. I mean, I absolutely get it. And, I certainly, it's probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, I went on a pretty kind of steep sort of, learning curve of many slaps around the face as I started to sort of look at, the issues of racism and privilege and diversity and oppression and all of that. And coming out of the, oh my God, I have been like a white middle class, a workshop leader. I mean, I certainly, thankfully, I think I've always had some kind of awareness. I don't think I would have ever said anything like what you're just describing. But nevertheless, I think the piece I hadn't got was my privilege, because I was identified with my experience as a child being so horrific. It took someone to point out to me, yes, you have all that, and nevertheless, you exist in such privilege just by the family you were born into and the way, and that was a real massive, massive transformational moment for me, and deeply uncomfortable. Deeply, deeply uncomfortable. It's like I just wanted to take every video I'd ever done offline, and kind of like undo everything that had ever come out my mouth. Like, oh God, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. And just the utter like torturous, cringing, squirming, that first layer of, and then obviously that took me on a journey. I don't think I've ever been a spiritual bypasser, because I'm so much of the grit. Like the grit has always been my thing. If I've got any shadow, it's going too far into the suffering. Sometimes I can go too far that way and forget to sort of go, hang on a minute, there's good stuff here. There is good stuff here. Let's remember that. Let's have a nourishing meal, let's eat some nice chocolate. So my tendency, if anything, is more overemphasizing with the suffering.
I can relate.
Yeah. Partly my astrological setup, but a lot because of my childhood, and also just the lens through which I see that I feel everything so intensely, and I'm seeing the absolute fucking devastation of what we're doing to our world, to all species, human and non-human. it's like the pain is just so immense. And literally anywhere I look, any moment I can see evidence of it. It's like I often say, the real madness of our world is that we're not on our knees in the street, wailing and grieving for what has been. The fact that we walk down the road and just carry on as normal, pretending that there's nothing wrong, that to me is the madness. The sanity would be us. I mean, I went to the Natural History Museum like a few years ago, and they just had, I walked in and there's the big thing in there. And then I walked into the first little room, and there was this glass cage with all these birds, and at least 50% of them, it said underneath extinct, 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 extinct. And I was just walking through, I can feel it now, I was just walking through there going, ooh. And I could just feel the grief just completely overtaking me. And I just wanted to get to my knees and like grieve right there. And part of the grief was I was looking around me and seeing these people just walking past this cabinet. I have no idea what they were feeling. Maybe they were all feeling the grief too, but seemingly just not registering all of this loss, just not registering it. And I was like, this is the madness. This is the madness that I'm the only one in here with tears running down my face, wanting to just scream at the top of my voice, look at this. Look at this. Do you not mind? Do you not see it? It's that we can't come together and feel. Because for me, I wonder if change can really happen unless we can feel it first. It's like I noticed this in the whole gender conversation movement, which I'm completely on board with. It's really important and I'm really glad it's come. But I feel like we've jumped straight to strategy. You know, oh, you've got to speak this language, you've got to say this, you've got to make sure we get our language right and our communication right, which is important. But there's a piece missing. It's like, if I understand why you're hurting, like that little example you just described about the workshop, when you tell me that story, and then you say to me, can I ask you to do X, Y, Z? Can you not say this, or can you not say that, or can you go and do some work around your unconscious bias, or whatever? I'm far more likely to want to do that because I've connected with you. I've got a sense of your pain. That's like, oh, wow, that's your pain. Not in terms of you educating me, but I've felt you. And it's like, wow, well, of course I want to do that. Why would I not? But just, oh, you need to stop doing this. It's like, well, why? I don't really understand. I'm just being now bossed around and told what to do. And my rebel's going to come out and kick against that. And then we get all this rebellion. And there's something about the collective grief that we can sit inside and really, really feel and hear the pain that we're carrying. And I think naturally from there, I just think so much would change because our hearts would feel driven to make different choices and to do things differently rather than, oh, here's a law change and we have to get on board with it.
How can that happen?
Yeah.
With climate? I'm sorry, I'm just in my realist today.
I get you.
Every day is different. Here we are.
One way it can happen is I run grief rituals on the land, which I make accessible to everybody. That's like one small way. But yeah, I hear you, and I do feel there is direct action there that can make a difference, like huge grief circles in the middle of London, or just me posting on Facebook all the time, or whatever it might be, like little ways.
It's happened to some extent with eco grief, but it happens in such tiny subcultures, It doesn't hit where the power is.
I'm not saying I got the answer, but what I'm saying
is... I'm not expecting you to have the answer.
There's a missing piece here, and it's same old. We don't want to feel the pain because we're like, what's the point in going to the pain? I'm already feeling the pain. I've had a lifetime of pain. Sort of thinking we felt it, but we haven't sort of, in a particular way, we haven't felt it, where we haven't felt held in it and had it be a transformational, a healing experience. It's just been like, here's the pain again. And I'm just activated because someone said something that's just so fucking painful. So there's something about us being able to sit and bear and be with that pain together that I feel has some sort of way that is going to help to start to bring together some of the isolation and the differences and the marginalization and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, fucking hell, I have plenty of visions about how that can happen, but I don't know how to execute them.
as a lifelong activist, how do you feel your activism is most effective now? Where do you put that energy?
I feel now that I'm most effective in doing trainings in leadership and working on this theme of belonging, because there's something about the exponential effect. Like if someone comes and works with me one-to-one, yeah, I can help to support them to, heal their wounds and blah, blah, blah. Or I can work in a group, and each of those people exponentially, hopefully, are going to go out and impact their little circle, their little friendship circle, their little community, their local shop. They might have more awareness maybe around the issue of racism, for example. And when they go back home, and we've explored it here and we've gone into it and we've done whatever we've done, and then they go to their local shop and they walk into the shop, and the way they walk in and what they're aware of and how they interact might change because they deeply understood something. It's, for me, it's not enough to just do the personal work on our own wound. It's how we then impact the field when we go back into our lives. It's like, that's why all my courses are a year long, because there's something about coming back again and again and how we bridge that into our real gritty everyday life. What does this actually look like on the ground in my life? Not just, oh yeah, when I'm here, it's all beautiful and I can be this amazing person. How can I be that person and feel resourced to be that person and strengthened and supported to be that person in my daily life when I'm walking down the road?
And what is your call to action that you want to leave us with? And there can be like an inner and an outer one.
So I can speak to a piece about the empath, which is to take, either when you first wake up in the morning or at some point during the day, to commit to taking an amount of time in the day, whether it's 3 minutes, to sit and ask yourself, what are the deeper needs that you need to feel safe in connection? Just to be in that inquiry, to notice how hard it is to know even what you need. I don't know. Just keep asking the question every day, ask the question, ask the question, ask the question. The other piece is the piece I spoke about earlier where, yes, we've got this utopia of, oh, we all want to live in nature, it's also beautiful in the village and everything. But actually, even as I walk down the road going to work in the middle of a city and all the bin bags all over the pavement and it's all fucking shit and there's, everything, like, can I just take a moment to put my focus on beauty? Because I don't think beauty should be a luxury in our life. I don't think creativity and beauty, I think that they're essential for the soul's evolution. That if we don't see beauty or experience beauty at some point every day in our life, our soul just dies. It's like we just become less and less resourced. And beauty is around us. We just have to hunt it out sometimes. And anywhere we are, we can always look at the sky and see beauty. This is beautiful. You can always see a star or see a leaf or a branch, something that we look at and we go, that's beautiful. And to sort of let it into our system some way.
Yeah, absolutely. You might know that this used to be called The Future is Beautiful. And because of that, but as a statement, it's a bit too simplistic, which is why I changed it. But because of that complete potentiality for noticing and creating beauty in amongst anything and everything, how would you like our friends listening to connect with you?
I guess just go to the website and see what's there. The 2 courses that are like the main threads are the leadership training, feminine leadership training, and also the circle of belonging. And both of those are year-long embedments into looking at that theme. Yeah, I mean, it's all on the website. You can always ring up for a 15-minute call and just chat to me and find out, whether I can meet your needs. We have a whole program around inclusivity and making things accessible. So I don't want people to feel that this work is only accessible to the rich white middle classes.
Thank you. And that's jewelswingfield.com.
Jewelswingfield.com.
Excellent.
I really want to thank you for your really probing questions. It's so refreshing not to be on an interview where we just sort of swim around in the soup of loveliness and it's all sort of sweet. And, I really, really appreciate it because it's, constant learning for me. And I really appreciate your engagement and your courage.
Thank you. Well, I'm coming from a perspective of a shared recognition of the loveliness and the power of this work, but yeah, I feel like we're hungry for those bits of it, of how we can make sure that everything within this kind of sphere of retreats, one-on-one work, transformative festivals, all of this, that it isn't just some sort of masturbation, I guess, that it actually really does land.
Yes, I'm absolutely with you. And I think I can confidently say for people who work with me that that is not my thing. The one of the reasons that people love to work with me, the first thing they say is, "I heard you swear on a talk. That was really refreshing." Don't talk in sort of woo-woo language, that I'm really down to earth and I'm really transparent in who I am. I don't put on like airs and graces and like, "Ooh, I'm a workshop facilitator." It's like I'll just come as I am. I reveal a lot about myself. I really want to get inside the mud and be real. People are coming to where I live. It's like I'm completely skinless here, I can't hide. And that's really important to me, that it's one way that I can maybe start to dismantle the whole kind of, where I am in the system.
Yeah, well, thank you for being willing, because I feel like these questions are, they're out there and people talk about these kind of things behind workshop facilitators' backs. And as someone that also holds retreats and workshops and one-to-one work, like I feel like to keep evaluating, like, how is this serving? How can this serve more? Like, how can I facilitate something that is real as we're constantly evolving, and our understanding of the world is evolving, and our understanding of ourselves is evolving, our understanding of the collective and our history and our future. It's always constantly in evolution. And so allowing ourselves to be alive to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've gone through a few deaths and rebirths over the last 6 or 7 years of my own evolving for exactly the reasons that you say, of having to go, oof, right, come back, do some more work, check out, where am I out of alignment? Actually, is this really okay, what I'm doing? No, it isn't, and having to eat whatever humble pie I got to eat and come back to ground and go, well, what now? How do I want to do it now? And yeah, forever in trainer wheels, but I'm committed at least.
Absolutely. Did you delete, by the way, all the old videos that made you cringe, or did you allow them to be there?
I did not. I wanted to, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I just thought,
Yeah.
no.
It's important. It's like we can't have shame for what we didn't know, like something around this need to be perfect, and cancel culture and everything means that we don't allow the messy human journey that we're all on, no matter who we are or what we're doing. Our understanding is always deepening. And I've said so many things 10 years ago that I'd be like, oh, who was that? But that was somebody living in the world as it was 10 years ago that knew what they knew. And
there's a funny story to that, a very quick one. I was at a festival. I'm very well known on the festival circuit, and I was running workshops at this festival, and I'd gotten up in the morning and I'd had some little altercation with my partner, and I walked out and went, oh, fuck you then. That was something like that. And this woman was walking past who was obviously like a huge devotee of my work. And she just stopped, and she was completely like, you could just see her face, like her whole world had been shattered because she saw my humanity. But she was like, I can't believe you're having an argument with your boyfriend. I trusted you. Like it was a complete sort of, I can never come and do any work with you. And I was like, this is exactly the thing that I want to dismantle. I do not want to be on that podium. That is not me. It's like, it's the realness for me is what I really aspire to be like, here I am. I make loads of bloody mistakes. It's like, that's the point. It's like, if we're trying not to make mistakes, we're never going to get anywhere.
And this meeting of conflict, like that you're able to tell your boyfriend in the moment to fuck off, probably you made up, like moved through that thing before you went and did the workshop, and it's not a big deal. And I think that that's the thing about relating, is that it is messy and there is going to be conflict, and it's all about how we can move through it. Can we let it go? Can we allow people to be who they are? Can we accept that the people in our lives are going to sometimes be angry? They're going to sometimes have grief. They're going to sometimes struggle in ways that we don't understand. They're going to behave in ways that hurt us. We're going to do all of that to them.
The bottom line is, it's not whether I fuck up, because I'm going to fuck up again and again and again. It's what I do when I see that I fuck up. That's the piece. That's the piece. But we're focused on trying not to fuck up. And that, I mean, obviously, got to try. But the reality is we will, but it's how I engage with that. If I try and hide it, I try and brush over it, I try and kind of pretend that it hasn't happened, or do I go, okay, oof, okay, humble pie. What do I need to do? That modeling that as a leader, as I am in some way, feels like the best thing I can do.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jules.
Thank you so much, Misha. It's been really, really just absolutely fab talking to you. I'm really loving where you're coming from.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.